So a bad PR day for the Carney Liberals. There was a lot going on, I'll be honest. I know I said every episode, but this one took a long time to get together because there was so much that is happening specifically today. First which, Blanchet, blast Mark Carney, which was number one. That was already tough. Number two, the auto sector, putting some lines in the sand with the Carney Liberals and telling them what's up and exactly what is to come if they don't get their crap together. And number three, bomb threats arise across many airports across the nation that is eventually, obviously, filtering conversation into what the heck is going on with our immigration system. It's not getting worse. They haven't even put things in place to make it better. It's only inflaming the problem with whatever it is they're doing or not doing. There's this and so much more, and welcome to the Elevate Podcast. I'm your host, Josh. We have a lot to get into, but if you get any value from today's episode, take the time to like, share, and subscribe. Helps to grow the show, helps us get to new audiences, and helps us to keep moving forward and giving people another alternative than the mainstream media. So let's get into our first story, shall we? Leader of the Bloc Québécois, Blanchet, did an interview in French, and he pulled no punches on Mark Carney because he's not happy. Because, well, we saw what happened to DST, that's number one. But now Trump is putting pressure on the dairy cartel here in Canada. And Blanchet, well, that's his hotbed. That's where the dairy cartel is really heavy in Quebec, and that's his people. That's who he wants to protect. And he's nervous that Carney's just going to sacrifice them. That is likely the backdrop to this and his statements regarding Mark Carney.
In a negotiating strategy, it seems to be, well, I'm going to give you everything just so that we can continue to talk by pretending that we'll have an agreement in 19 days. If that happens, well, it may not be a wonderful agreement. So I get the impression that that Mr. Carney has borrowed Mr. Trudeau's spine. And we have a lot of questions to ask him. Unfortunately, in the fall, we will be asking, well, he will have some questions.
What a statement. Seems like Mark Carney has borrowed the spine of Mr. Justin Trudeau. We're getting nothing in these negotiations. Trump is getting everything he wants. We're not getting anything back. What is happening? There is a lot of spinelessness going on in these negotiations, and it seems like he's just giving him everything. What is going to happen? We're going to have some questions come the fall, meaning when question period and the House resume in September. But that's the question a lot of people are asking, like, what's going on? And this is the thing. I know I was upset. I was a part of this group. But as I kind of took a bit of a step back, I started realizing what was going on. So the House goes home for the summer, starting at the end of June. And we won't be seeing them for a couple months. And I was talking to Jasmine about this. And I was like, wasn't happy about it at first. But then it hit me of there's nothing else to really pay attention to politics-wise. All eyes are going to be on Mark Carney, his cabinet, in this Liberal government. There's no distraction with any committees. There's no distraction with anything in Parliament. There's no distraction with the question period. It's just what they're doing or not doing. And quite frankly, it's going to be an interesting summer because we know there's like, all right, everyone can just go home for the summer. We got some work to do. And I was like, okay, we'll see what you do or you don't do. And it felt like at the time it was a plan to essentially try to get scrutiny off of them so that they can go ahead and do some not so savory things. And without any type of oversight from Parliament. That was a worry. But the problem is, all of us are watching. Yes, we're enjoying our summers, but all of us are watching what's going on. And when the fall does resume, it's going to get ugly in Parliament. Because if this is the start of how things are going, how are things going to progress moving forward? For example, Global Mail reports, automakers ask Carney to repeal zero-emission vehicle mandate. As you've seen, because of these Trump tariffs, because of the trade talks right now, the auto sector is getting hit pretty hard. It's not going too well for them at the moment. And on top of that, Mark Carney's like, yeah, we're going to do this whole EV mandate thing. And the auto sector is like, so I don't know if you've been paying attention. We've been saying we're not selling any EVs right now. No one's buying them. They're too expensive. We actually have to shut down parts of our EV departments because no one is buying these things. So just when they thought they got their agreement when it came to USMCA stuff, then they got hit with this nonsense. And they're just like, huh? What is Mark Carney doing? And we'll open up the first paragraph here. Auto sector chief executives urged Prime Minister Mark Carney Wednesday during a meeting on the Canada-US trade war to repeal federal regulations that require 1 in 5 vehicles sold starting in 2026 to be zero-emission models. The CEOs of Ford Motor Company of Canada, FN, General Motors of Canada Co. and Stellantis Canada met with Mr. Carney in Ottawa as the Canadian and U.S. governments try to reach a trade deal by July 21st that might end Washington's tariffs on Canadian-made automobiles, among other levies. As I said, the auto sector has been in the center of a lot of this. And Mark Carney is like, yeah, I know, we're trying to get things sorted with Donald Trump, but we're also going to throw like the stupid EV crap on. That is only going to make things drastically worse. And Global did a piece on this to add a little more flesh to what is happening, and here it is.
David Aiken explains what they're worried about. David.
Well, Donna, Canada's automakers have a lot on their plate these days. And of course, it's not just the U.S. president's tariffs. It's also Ottawa's insistence that all new cars and light trucks sold in Canada have to be emission-free within the decade. The federal electric vehicle, or EV mandate, sets sales targets for zero-emission vehicles that apply to all automakers and importers. The overall goal is that 100% of new cars and light trucks sold in 2035 will be zero-emission vehicles. Now, to get there, Ottawa has prescribed some interim targets. By 2030, for example, that number has to hit 60%. But CEOs of 3 automakers that met with Prime Minister Mark Carney Wednesday told him that meeting those targets and the fines they'll pay for failing to hit those targets will kill the Canadian auto industry.
The EV mandate itself is not sustainable. The targets that have been established cannot be met.
As for the Carney government, neither the PM nor his ministers were taking questions on the topic Wednesday, but the government wants to press ahead nonetheless with EV adoption and is looking at some options, including continuing with a consumer rebate program. That rebate program is officially paused right now. And without those rebates, sales of EVs, which are more expensive than gas-powered cars, are slowing. The latest StatsCan data from March showed that EV car sales dropped 44% compared to the same month a year ago, although sales of EV pickup trucks continued to grow. Overall sales of EV trucks and cars now make up just 6.5% of all new vehicle sales. The EV mandate target for next year is more than double that, 20%. Donna.
Okay, David Aiken in Ottawa, thank you.
That is what we like to call ugly. You saw the numbers. It's looking bad and it's only getting worse. The auto sector is already having a tough time dealing with the uncertainty around the tariffs and the negotiations around that. Then on top of that, you have the Mark Carney government saying, yeah, we're going to throw this EV stuff on to make sure to get things real interesting if it hasn't been hard enough on you already. And not only are we going to give this to you, we're also not going to do the whole rebate program thing. So people are definitely not going to buy this. And the only way to get them to buy it is to give them tax dollars to help them fund the purchase of them. That's how discombobulated and broken these policy ideas are. People, it only is going to get worse and continue to gut the auto industry in our country. And you can sit there and blame Donald Trump. But the reality is, it's the poor policies being put forward that are actually putting the death knell into all of our industries here in Canada. And that's really the part. We've been talking about this forever, haven't we? You can say Donald Trump is the problem, but the reality is our politicians put us in the weak spot to the point where we have no say at the negotiation table. And Mark and Donald Trump can do whatever he so pleases. And that is the reality. But don't worry, these EV sales, these EV programs, oh, it's such a great idea. Because it really helps us kind of green our economy, as they say. It helps us push us forward. But don't worry, Blacklock's reporter did some homework on a climate program from 2018 to see how it did over the years. And, well, it did exactly how you thought it would do. $300 million in federal climate programs failed to produce new jobs or lower emissions, report says. A report by the Department of Natural Resources says 2 2018 federal climate programs that promised new jobs and lower emissions failed to provide either, according to Blacklock's reporter. In fact, managers stopped collecting data that would establish whether taxpayers received value for money for the programs that received multi-year funding to the tune of $301 million to subsidize power projects. Managers stopped collecting certain performance metrics, greenhouse gas emission reductions, throughout the project duration, said the report. These metrics will only be collected in final reporting as those responsible for program delivery only expect meaningful data to be available when solutions have been fully implemented and tested. At that time, evidence suggests it will most likely be too difficult and too late to identify weaknesses or errors and make changes and corrections. Auditors wrote that the records made available were incomplete. Surprise, surprise. Removing annual reporting increases the risk of poor quality performance information, said the report. Documents provided by funding recipients had some gaps in actual outcomes and results. The evaluation team also observed some outcome information is not captured consistently across projects. So let's break that down into some common English, shall we? It was started off really bad early on. It wasn't looking good. And so they said, you know what? Screw documenting. We're not going to do it. Let's put our numbers in at the end and then we'll produce that. Then we did. That's what they did. And information was missing. Nothing was adding up. Nothing made sense. Oh, it turns out the program didn't hit any targets that it claimed it was going to. Justin Trudeau is saying, our new green economy is going to create more jobs. Our new green economy is going to lower emissions. It did absolutely none of those things. But hey, color us all surprised, aren't we? Not. We've warned about this time and time and time again. This is just an utter get-rich-quick scheme that the government is putting on using taxpayer dollars. Mark Carney's been on record saying we can get rich with this new green economy thing. And that's what's happening right now with the EVs as well. There has been very little progress, very little positive impacts from any of the programs that this government has implemented in the name of green economy, in the name of climate change. And taxpayers are sitting here holding the bag with nothing, wondering what did they get back for their dollars. It is rough, but don't worry. Mark Carney's elbows up approach is coming in hot these days. National Post just posted. It's not elbows up approach as RCMP renews contracts for American Helicopters. Industry Association says the Blackhawks were granted highly unusual special exemptions that allow them to do non-military jobs in Canadian airspace. The RCMP has renewed the contracts for 3 Black Hawk helicopters to patrol the Canada-US border despite accusations by the Industry Association that the contracts are the opposite of the government's elbows up approach and that the choppers don't meet the government's own safety regulations. RCMP spokesperson Andrew Dorinzo confirmed that the federal police has decided to rehire the 3 helicopters for at least the next 3 months. The contracts for the second-hand helicopters purchased by private contractors after the U.S. military decided to update much of its own fleet kicked in on Canada Day. The new contracts follow a National Post investigation that revealed that 4 Blackhawks were purchased by Canadian contractors who then signed patrolling contracts with the RCMP for 3 of them. The other was hired by the Alberta government. The existing RCMP contracts for 3 of the choppers worth an estimated $16 million expired June 30th. Documents show that the Canadian helicopter industry had accused Ottawa of breaking its own rules, for example, by allowing the used choppers to carry passengers or even flying over developed areas. The Blackhawks have been used mostly to patrol the border in search of illegal migrants, drug smugglers, or other illicit activities. Trevor Mitchell, Chief Executive of the Helicopter Association of Canada, said he was very surprised that the RCMP would sign another contract to lease the American Blackhawks, while Canadian manufacturers offer rival products that can do at least as good a job. I can't see how many of these transpire into an elbows-up policy or a Canada-first policy. But surprise, surprise, that's where we're at. I know people who are watching the show are not surprised by this. None of us are at this point. It's just too predictable. We all saw this was going to happen because we saw the writing on the wall at all. How do you just decide to, we're just not going to do anything with the United States anymore, even though we share the same border? No, we're going to continue buying from them. We're going to continue using their stuff. And we're going to do so quietly so that our constituents don't get mad at us. But the constituents are finally starting to catch on. At least those who are so pro-Carney are starting to lose faith in Carney these days. And we're only 3 months in. I said it once, I'll say it again. Give it 8 more months, and he's going to continue to become the most deeply unpopular prime minister in a shortest amount of time possible. It is fairly interesting. But let's go back to something that happened today. Bomb threats at 6 Canadian airports today. People are wondering what's going on. Well, service has resumed after bomb threats that caused delays in evacuations at multiple Canadian airports earlier Thursday. NAV Canada said in a statement Thursday. NAV Canada provides air traffic control operations to Canadian airports. On Thursday morning, their facilities in Ottawa, Montreal, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Calgary, and Vancouver were the target of bomb threats. The agency now says normal service has resumed, but cautioned travelers all over the country to check with their airlines for potential delays. So that's just kind of the story of the day. 6 airports targeted with bomb threats. That's weird. That's odd. It made me think about this article, where thousands of foreigners' criminal convictions forgiven by Ottawa over an 11-year span, raising transparency concerns. More than 17,000 foreigners have had their criminal convictions forgiven by the Immigration Department over the past 11 years. Removing a bar to coming to Canada, federal government figures show The disclosure has raised transparency concerns about the type of offenses they committed. Foreigners are, in general, inadmissible to Canada if they have been convicted of an act that is considered a criminal offense in this country. But Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada has the power to grant an exception if 5 years have elapsed since a person was convicted or finished a sentence. Government figures show that in the 11 years up to and including 2024, over 17,000 people convicted of criminal offenses abroad were considered rehabilitated by the IRCC. This meant they were able to apply to enter Canada, including through work and study visas as permanent residents or visitors. The IRCC has not, however, released a breakdown of the kind of criminal offenses that were forgiven. It said in a statement to the Globe and Mail that the immigration minister would be involved in decisions related to the most serious of offenses. So when you see this happen, when you see 6 airports shut down due to bomb threats, and then you see stats like this where over 17,000 criminals were given forgiveness over the past 11 years in this country, you're just like, okay, who are they? And then you see this stuff come up where lax immigration vetting makes Canada a prime target for Iranian infiltration, says Secure Canada. And the byline saying reluctance to deport IRCC caseworkers, pressure to maintain low rejection rates makes Canada an appealing target for foreign agents, Secure Canada says. Not only did we bring in people on record amounts over the past 10 years, we have also forgiven over 17,000 of them who have committed crimes in the countries of origin. And then we find out that our IRCC caseworkers were being pressured to make sure that they reject as few people as possible, likely tying their performance to these numbers. You wonder why crime is out of control in this country? You want to know why it seems like we have no national identity these days? Well, this is part and parcel why. And let's not forget a big problem that we're starting to see. Recent news reports, however, suggest Iran has as many as 700 agents at work in Canada, with the possibility of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps members fleeing here as the Iranian regime becomes less stable. The Sun spoke with numerous Iranian Canadians who've said they and their families back home are under constant threat based on what they've said in public or to the media about Iran's despotic government. Iranian agents have deep ties to Hezbollah. They have ties to other expat communities that share the Shia access and an ideological worldview, Secure Canada says. This is Canada in 2025. So we've brought in way too many people, for one. 2, we've then forgiven over 17,000 people of their criminal acts in their countries of origin, says you have a home here. Number 3, we have close to 700 Iranian agents working here in Canada who are from a authoritarian regime, who have values that don't align with our traditional values here in Canada. And then you wonder why we've attracted extremist groups from all over the world here to make Canada home. And then you get thrown to the gutter if you bring up any of these issues. And it makes you wonder why that is the case. And the reason why I've kind of taken a long, drawn-out approach to this is because I want to share with you one final article, which I thought was fairly interesting, coming from Axios about Donald Trump's administration in the US with how they're dealing with naturalized citizens. Want to know about the DOJ revoking citizenship of naturalized Americans? The DOJ directed attorneys to prioritize denaturalization in cases where naturalized citizens commit crimes, per the memo. A DOJ spokesperson told Axios that denaturalization proceedings will only be pursued as permitted by law and supported by evidence against individuals who illegally procured or misrepresented facts in the naturalization process. Those who gain citizenship through unlawful means and endanger our national security will not maintain the benefits of being an American citizen, the statement said. And this is the thing. This is something that the Trump administration is looking into at the moment. And a lot of the volume around the Donald Trump administration these days and how they're dealing with illegal immigration is that they are inhumane, that it's not fair. It's kind of disgusting. And quite frankly, I'll be honest, there are situations that have come to the surface that are like, yeah, that's rough. That was a mistake. That probably shouldn't have happened. But I put this all at the feet of the bleeding heart Democrats and those who supported such poor immigration policy up to this point. And then I transitioned that here at home. Because right now, the lefties are now pointing their fingers at Donald Trump saying, look how awful you're treating people. No, my friends, what is awful is opening the borders and lying to people to get them to your country. They didn't receive the things that they were promised. And in effect, broke the laws of the country that they immigrated to. What I say about the Donald Trump situation and what's going on there, especially them looking at denaturalizing citizens, is it was fairly inhumane to do what the Democrats did and bringing in people on a false premise. Our liberal government has done the same. And the day comes, maybe, we'll see, that a government gets in with some backbone and starts taking a strong stance on the immigration issue and how disastrous it is right now, yep, they'll be painted as bad. But it's going to take some courage for whoever it is to move forward, because what the liberals did was incredibly inhumane and created the scenario and created the opportunity for what we see now. A country falling apart, overweighted by mass immigration, a country divided on so many levels, that if or when someone actually pushes back against it and starts putting laws or starts pushing policy to undo the damage that's been done, they'll be cited as racist, bigoted, anything. But the reality is, people were promised one thing, nothing was done on so many levels, that you allowed criminals in waves. Well, there's going to be an opposite reaction to that. And you're going to have to deal with it. And quite frankly, it's the poor immigration policies that are leading to the damage we are currently seeing. But anyways, have yourselves a good one. I'm out.